Hi, welcome to the No Matter What Club. I'm so excited for my dear friend, sister, and trudging buddy to be on our episode. Six is a celebrated drag queen, Emmy-award winning makeup artist, and hairstylist who lives in Los Angeles, California. He is known best for his breathtaking visuals, captivating performance style, and unique perspective. Six has amassed a loyal social media following and continues to engage diverse audiences worldwide. After overcoming homelessness and addiction, Six now uses his considerable social media presence to advocate for mental health, support, and sobriety. Six's bold biker chic aesthetic has earned him the attention of Sam Smith and the band Erasure, both having tapped him for appearances in their music videos for Promises and Nerves of Steel, respectively. Six is most well known for his role as a makeup artist on the HBO show We're Here, where he uses the art of drag and unapologetic pride to transform communities and lives. I'm so excited for this episode. We get to uncover, discover, and discard. This episode is called From Mess to Message, and we're so excited to have Six here. Oh my God, I'm so excited for this episode of No Matter What Club. Again, as I said, this is one of my trudging buddies, my sister, somebody that I've just looked at and watched your journey since you've come into the rooms, and somebody that I just am honored to call my friend that we have here on the podcast today. So Emmy Award winning makeup artist Six is here.
Hi.
We also have Jack and we have Mell.
Hi.
We have some really interesting topics to talk about. From mess to message is something that we hear all the time in the rooms. And you and I growing up together in the rooms of Crystal Meth Anonymous and the sober rooms and the sober community of Los Angeles, we've been able to experience each other on this journey. Yeah. And I was hoping you could tell us a little bit about your story.
I think my story began, I mean, as far as usage goes, it just not knowing who I was as a person. Mm. I think that that's a common denominator for queer people is we grow up in these, we grow up in these spaces where we're not allowed to be ourselves. It's not celebrated. And I feel as much as I knew who I was on the inside, I was never allowed to share that with anybody publicly. A few of my friends knew, but years and years and years of putting a mask on and playing pretend and just being okay with being in situations that other people put you in and trying to always make it the safe space for everyone else, never realizing that I was the one that needed a safe space, really took me, into my 20s. And I tried really hard to see myself in the faces of the people that I surrounded myself with. But when you don't know yourself, it's really hard to see what you identify with. And so I found a lot of myself in the queer clubs. And those clubs taught me how to escape. And that escapism is what led to me being homeless and, moving all over the country and not living my authentic self and, doing, being really risky, being very risky with my person. I think that, growing up in the HIV/AIDS crisis of the 80s really terrified me when it came to sexuality or having sex or being sexual in any way, shape, or form. And so if I wasn't in a monogamous relationship, which I was in enough to take me through at least 15 years of my life, you eventually end up in a place where you say, fuck it, I don't care anymore. And I had gotten to that point where I just did not care anymore. And I got into the world of, I got into some really harsh shit. And it took me all the way to the streets of Skid Row. And I don't know how else to say it, but at the time, Skid Row seemed like a dream from where I was, I don't really know how to say it. I mean, the journey it's really quick, but it seems like it took forever to get there.
Yeah, I think we can all relate to that. I mean, I was homeless.
Same. Yeah.
Yeah, at one point, yeah.
You were?
Yes.
So you had a place to get your mail or no?
As my mother asked. But asked my mother I was homeless, asked me I was on an adventure for a couple months. Yeah.
It's so common within our community. I mean, the stuff that we're gonna unpack in this episode is, as LGBTQ individuals, like trying to find our voice in a world where we aren't accepted and we're looked at as the underbelly of society sometimes, especially with what we're seeing in the media today. I think that identity is so important.
Well, I think it comes down to communication. And when you get to a place where you're finally able to deal with who you are as a person, no matter whether you're gay, straight, lesbian, bisexual, trans, when you've been othered your entire life, talking, finding your voice is probably one of the most powerful things that you can do. And you can't really do that in a club, right? And you get really hooked on the music and you get hooked on the feeling. And that feeling tends to take you into really dark places, right? Because you're constantly searching for the next high, the highest possible. I want to get higher than I've ever been before. And what really gets me high now is communication, sitting around having a conversation with people. And I think that when we use our voices and when we encourage each other to use our voices, like when we came in, we sat down, we were like, hey, how are you? You know what I mean?
Like the real of how are you?
Yeah. And I think encouraging people, even at, I just went to a friend's birthday the other day and we went to a club down the street just for a brunch type situation. And it was so loud in there. You couldn't hold a conversation. And it really got me to thinking about how non-conducive communication is for our community. Like our community isn't built for communication, right? So we get on these apps looking for communication, right?
Yeah.
And we start hoping to have this connectivity with other people. And really what you find yourself is that other people only know how to communicate physically, right? And so we lose this communication within our own community. And it's really our voices that if you find your voice and you start utilizing your voice, that you start to feel more powerful in who you are as a person. And you start to gain some headway as far as being a member of your community, being a pillar of your community. And I think it's really important to be vocal about the way that you feel. I'm not feeling so good today. And that's the honest truth. I don't feel so great today. And it's okay to say that. I don't even know why I can tell you a million reasons why I don't feel great today, but I'm just not feeling my best.
Yeah.
It's not even a physical thing. It's just a mental thing. And I think bringing that to light and letting people know, like, hey, I'm just not at my best. It's not your responsibility to make me feel better. And I would really appreciate it if you wouldn't attempt to try to make me feel better.
Yeah.
But just being able to say I don't feel good feels fucking great.
Yeah. And having others like you being that vulnerable to actually say your truth in that moment. And like, that is just like this opening for empathy.
Yeah.
And I think in our community, like we don't have access to a lot of empathy. We weren't like raised in emotion and like
we
emotional
didn't receive
intelligence.
it.
It was never given. So we were never taught, and we do what we're taught. So we put on the mask and we continue to go out and wear these different people on us without actually sharing the real of what's going on in our authentic selves.
Yeah. And you say that like putting the mask on, and I sit here in full drag, but who I am utilizing my voice, it's still the same person. I don't change just because I put a wig on or just because I put a different outfit on or I look like I appear to change my gender. I am still the same person vocally, verbally.
That's right.
And I think that when I first got into doing drag again, because when I was 14 years old, I started doing drag because it was a means to an end. I was a teenage runaway. I had no opportunity to make a living. And, working in queer clubs at 14, 15 years old was really the only kind of income I was going to ever be able to receive. And I was lucky enough to be able to even get that. Of course, you meet bar owners that have other ideas of what they'd like to do with you, and you find yourself being privileged enough to find yourself in those spaces, not realizing that they have ulterior motives. And so it really, it was a battle. It was a battle not only on the outside, but on the inside. I found myself a victim of lots and lots and lots of other people's alternatives, ulterior motives, and that was hard. It was either do as I say that I want you to do, or go back and suffer. And thank God I'm the person that I am. I'm a rebel bitch, and I have cut my nose off to spite my face a million times. I refuse to give in to somebody else's desires of me in order to live comfortably. And I have lived uncomfortably probably a majority of my 48 years on earth. So
I love that you just said that, because it's like, I'm not going to sacrifice who I am for your comfort.
Right.
And I think that we are taught that as a community. Like,
of course.
oh, fucking tone it down and like, you know, pull back just to make you comfortable. Like, that is not my responsibility or my job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Say, Jack, do you relate to any of that? Because I think...
Well, we talked in the last episode, we talked a little bit about like my introduction to gayness, queerness was through older men, right? I learned how to be a gay man. I learned how to be a queer person through older men, including not only how to carry myself in society and what's expected of me, but also how to have sex. And I think in retrospect, it's a lot easier to see that as possibly a predatory relationship a lot of the time. You know, going back to what you were saying about the spaces not lending themselves to communication, I think so much of that sexual transaction as well, sharing ourselves physically, if I don't have my voice, if I don't know who I am, I'm not going to be able to communicate myself effectively physically, sexually, and, you know, be a victim to a lot of things that, you know, I have to believe heterosexual kids just don't deal with.
Growing up, I remember being told that I should, and not saying this directly, but this was just implied. I have to walk a certain way. I have to navigate a room a certain way. I have to lower my voice. I can't hold my wrist a certain way. I have to play sports. And so when I was figuring out who I was as a gay man, I hated myself.
Of course. But let me ask you something. Is that still the MO today when you look at yourself in the mirror?
Absolutely not, because, and this is why I'm grateful for sobriety, because I don't know who I would be without my identity as a sober man. I don't know if everybody in the world gets this rule book that we were so, we had the privilege of getting when we walked into the 12-step community. But like, I learned how to be a man in the 12 steps of Crystal Meth Anonymous for me.
Yeah. I mean, I think everybody has their own journeys with that. I mean, I was homeless. I was probably not in my best mind. You know, I know that I wasn't in my best mind. I mean, anybody that has had to live on the streets for a severe amount of time loses a lot of their dignity, loses their voice, loses the ability. I mean, communication involves practice, right? Anything in this world involves practice. And I know that I did not have it as easy as I saw some of my other counterparts having it. You know, I was older. I was probably a million times dirtier or stinkier looking, or maybe even I really did stink. I don't know. I know that I was really scary when I came into those rooms. I know that if I would have seen me coming into the rooms, I would have been terrified of me. And so I still even see it in the rooms where pretty privilege gets you the medicine that you need much quicker.
I think that's very interesting that you talk about that, because I feel like I wasn't aware of my privilege until I got into the rooms. And if it wasn't for the way that and I'm not really trying to be facetious by any means, if it wasn't for the way that I looked, I know that I'd be dead.
Yeah.
The way that I looked has graced me a lot of privilege. And so one of the reasons that I wanted to do this podcast is because there are trans women of color that don't have that privilege living in Alabama right now, that like don't even have the ability to receive any resources.
Yeah.
And that.
But there are also trans women of color in this city who don't realize that there are resources available.
Totally.
That part.
You know, so it's a nationwide epidemic. It's a global epidemic. And, you know, the current situation that we are encountering now, it really does come down to limiting the access that you have to one another within your communities to limit the amount of communication that you have, right? And the more that we find ourselves in these situations where we're privileged enough to come together, to have these tough conversations, to record them, to put them out on the internet, to be vocal, you know? I know that there are a lot of times in spaces that I take up in the jobs that I have and a lot of people that I work with where my voice, it's not always welcomed, right? And so I have to speak up in the rooms that are available for me. And being able to do that is so important, and sitting down and having one-on-one communications and conversations with people. It's the reason why the rooms are so important. But do you guys agree that the after the rooms was the more important part for me?
The
connection,
fellowship.
yeah.
I always say we get to go have cheap food and even cheaper conversation.
Yeah.
You know, it gives us the ability to connect with our peer. Like when I was getting high, I just wanted to be loved.
Yeah.
I just wanted friends.
Yeah.
Is that common with everyone
Yeah.
here?
I mean, I got sober in a town of 1,000 people in rural California. I did not get sober in a large metropolitan area where there are 1,800 meetings a day. And if you want to go to a meeting for poets, there's a meeting for poets. If you want to go for a meeting for queer people, there's a meeting for queer people. I got sober in a town where there was one meeting a day, if I was lucky. And I was sure as hell the only gay person in the rooms there. And to speak to what you're talking about with the communication and communication being a privilege, you know, I know for a fact that stepping into a space where you are the minority person, you are an ambassador, whether you like it or not, to your entire
You represent
community.
that just off the jump.
And so if
Yeah.
I was late, all gay people are late.
Right.
If I was an asshole, all gay people are rude. I knew that I was showing up to that space like as an ambassador for queer people. And I know for a fact that there were a lot of people who I did not have similar values with, but I walked away from those relationships really having an impact on them and them having an impact on me.
I think that
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, like, I didn't know that that was a part of my responsibility until I got sober.
Yeah.
To be a voice, to own my voice, to stand in my truth, no matter what.
Yeah.
Right? Because I take that very seriously as a person in the community that has a platform. That is a privilege to have any sort of platform to be able to speak on some of these issues. And it's also like, that is my responsibility to my community. And that is an indebtedness that I pay on the shoulders that I have stood on, right, throughout history, right? And I always want to represent that in a way that's open and inviting, but also from a place of advocacy and change. Because right now, the sea change, we need it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that just, it goes back always to the book for me. It's always the principles of the program for me. It's not about the personalities. And I think for me in the beginning, it was about the personalities. And luckily for all of us, we got an opportunity at some point to really learn what the distinction was between the program and the personalities of the people in the program, because there were many times in the rooms where personalities really walked me out of the room.
Always.
And I think that, you know, again, thank God, the places that we got sober in, people taught us the fundamentals of what the program is, because that is where I learned how to be a human being. That is where I learned how to have a voice. That is where I learned how to take responsibility and to become accountable for who I am as a person.
Do you remember the first time we met?
I don't.
Well, okay, let me go back. We met in the rooms, but one of the first memories that I had of you, there are two. The first one is my friend Jay and I were standing outside of our car, and you had started dabbling in the rooms, and you had your book bag, and you were walking up the street, and you were geeked. And
Happy.
You looked at us and you go, "Learn it." And just and you just kept walking.
She's still in there. She's still in there. Very, very confident. I think that it's, you know, those things are such a deflection, right? It's like, I'm going to bite your hand off before you have an opportunity to notice what's wrong about me. And I think that that's just stems from insecurity, right? And as confident as I might seem, I'm just a person who is constantly taking account of how other people are interacting with me, knowing 100% that the way the world interacts with me is 51% my responsibility.
I don't know if you remember this, but when you were coming around and I dabble in a little bit of drag too, but I was a very baby drag queen, and I was about to go out and be a backup dancer in AALA for someone, and I was about to walk on stage, and you just grabbed me and you said, "Bitch, I need to fix this hair." You were like, "I'm not letting my sister walk out there looking like this."
Yeah.
And we had this moment backstage where it wasn't two sober people. It was, for me, it was like gay family, like, you know, it was just this moment that we had, and when we connected, and it was just, it's something I'll never forget, because I saw you when you came in, and I saw you just back there doing hair, and you were just in your element in something that you were really good at, and it was just really cool to connect as a community that way.
I think that lends itself to being of service. And I think that I don't remember this situation, and I'm so glad that you remember that, because that gives me, you know, getting sober and getting homeless, like getting unhomeless. How do you say that?
Housed.
Yeah,
Housed.
becoming, I mean, I was unhoused, so becoming homed, you know, it was like a trifecta, you know what I mean, of things that I was dealing with at the same time. So I wasn't just looking for a house. I wasn't just trying to find sobriety. I wasn't just trying to find my place in this world. I was also trying to make a living for myself. And I feel like it was such an overwhelming experience for me, one that I still haven't unpacked. I just really put my nose to the grind. And when they said, make yourself available to be of service, I did. And I did that in every capacity possible, not just within the rooms, but, you know, when it came to the things that I was good at. It
You
was
have
like,
never
if you're,
told me no.
Yeah.
Every time I pick up my phone and I say,
and I never
"Will you be
will.
here?"
I
You have
never will.
always shown up for
I
me.
never will say no, you know, because saying no means that there's something else better for me, right? And the only thing better for me than saying, the only thing better for me would be sleep. You know what I mean? If I really needed that. But like, I'm 48. I'm going to be 49 years old this year. I'm going to be 8 years sober this year. Like, there's a lot of things that happened for me as an older queer person in this community. I felt like I was really going against time. I felt like I had so much time that I had to make up for. And that's something that I'm still unpacking and still dealing with. But, you know, and I'll get there. I'll get to a point where I say, you know what, I've done enough, but I just don't feel like I've done enough. And being of service is such it's such a jolt for me.
Do you feel like there's so much that you missed out on through your addiction that you're trying to make up for? Because for me, I feel that way too.
I have moments of that, I think, but like without my addiction, like I would not be sitting here today. And like there's always this reminder of like, it was a life orientation. Like I had to reorient my entire life. It wasn't just about sobriety. It was about everything in my life, everything I thought I believed in, everything I knew about myself, everything that I knew about other people. All of that was reoriented. It kind of spun me around. And then when I get to it, I'm like, did I miss out on stuff? Do I want to make up for things? Sure, but it's in the way that I walk every day in the world that I'm living. Like that is, you know, we call it a living amends, right? For all the times that I was unavailable or, you know, didn't extend a hand, I have oriented my life to be in a position to where that is a constant for me. Right. So there's no time lost. There's only possibility on the other side of this for me. Like this has been an expansive thing, and the life I was living was so small. It was so narrow focused. It was so tiny. It was so small. No one got in and no one got out. I held hostages, and I was also a hostage as well. Right? Yeah. So like sobriety enabled this really beautiful opportunity to expand my life and to reach out to others every single day of it. So I don't have an issue with like missed time. Like this is the time for me.
I agree with that. I don't feel like I feel like everything that I went through made me the person that I am. It put me in the seat that I get to take up today.
Yeah.
What I meant by that is, for me, it was financial. You know what I mean? How much longer do I have left to work and build up, you know, how much longer am I going to be on this earth? It was really like a matter of like, I don't have a 401k. I don't have any money in the bank. I don't have, you know, I didn't have insurance. Like, I mean, it was just so many things that I felt like I was literally a fish swimming against the stream constantly. Yeah. And, you know, holding myself accountable, showing up to meetings, being a member of the community, attempting to go after my dreams and my goals. And thank God I had those opportunities, but like, I need more.
Yeah.
You know what I
And
mean?
like the step up, like I remember like getting sober in my first 2 years, like my first 6 months, I didn't even have a phone.
Yeah.
Like my phone was taken by the cops. Okay.
Same.
I had a pair of shoes that walked me to a bus stop, that I took a bus for 2 hours to my first sober job, took the bus 2 hours home. And I mean, I really like, I didn't even have a way to like contact people outside of like, you know, an Obama phone that would hook up to Wi-Fi every once
Thanks,
in a while.
Obama,
Thank
for keeping
I
us
mean-
tweakers connected.
Yeah, I had keys to the log cabin before I ever had an apartment.
Yeah, right.
Which
like,
was
thank
wild.
God for like the generosity of everyone that like they're angels, right? They're these people that were in my life that gave me keys to places or said, you can stay at our sober living. It's fine. I know you need to get a job and all the things like, but that generosity like has led the way, you know, every step. And I get the uphill battle. Like
Yeah.
that is, whew.
Yeah, I want to shoot over to Jack, but before I do that, one of the things that I remember when I got my first debit card, and I called my sponsor and I said, "What is this chip on this debit card?" I had a prepaid Green Dot credit card that I did all of my transactions through, but like I had never had a debit card, and my sponsor makes fun of me to this day because I literally called him and I said, "Girl, how do you use this thing?" And I didn't know that you put the chip into the little thing. That's how alienated I was from society. How do you feel about all of this?
I mean, it's talking about feeling like a fish swimming against the stream. The number one thing that I work with clients is just, you know, there's this term adulting that exists now. That's sort of this catch-all for like functioning as society thinks I should be functioning. But there really is no guidebook for like, how do I get a security deposit on a house? How much is it going to cost for me to lease a car? Like there's no information. Everybody, if the only thing that's certain is death and taxes, why aren't we teaching people how to do their taxes?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Smart.
Like it just feels like there is no guide to these basic life skills. I have people of all ages come to my office and say, I haven't ever made a doctor's appointment for myself, or I haven't ever done X, Y, and Z. And I think I really relate to the idea of like, that's how I quantify lost time, because that's how society quantifies my time on this earth. This is what I've achieved, what I've made, all these things. And it can feel really fucking daunting when you're newly sober and, you know, you don't even know half of the vocabulary people are using around life skills.
Right.
I look back at that time when I got sober, and at the time I remember, so I was 2 years sober. I bought my first car, and the window didn't roll down, and all I could afford was fast food. So I would drive through the drive-through. I would have to open my door to like reach out and grab my Big Mac, and I was so mortified. And today I look back at that and I said, I'm always like, thank God I didn't get everything back like this. Thank God I had to go through all of that stuff. And at the time, I called my sponsor. I'm like, where are my fucking cash and prizes? Like, I'm 2 years sober. I'm going to work. I'm doing what I need to do. I'm managing a sober living. I'm sober. I stopped using drugs. Like, when is my life going to come back to, like, I'm a tweaker. I love instant gratification. I thought I was going to get sober and like my life was going to transform. And for me, it didn't happen that way. It took years.
Yeah.
But I mean, just like any successes in this world, you know, Judge Judy didn't make it until she was in her 50s.
I love
That's
her.
right.
Tina Turner didn't
love
make
her.
it until she was in her 40s, you know?
Samuel
So
L. Jackson,
if you've got the strength and the determination, if you've got the tenacity and the ability to have perseverance, like continue to show up for yourself and for other people, and continue to find yourself being of service to your community and to your sobriety, and the gifts will come. You know, for me, people didn't take me in on couch commitments. I had to sleep for a year into my sobriety still on the streets. I had to work on a show with no kit. And, you know, I mean, I had a lot of things where people would say, can you do this? And I would say yes. And I would go home at night and I would try to finagle whatever I could to make myself capable to show up the next day and make it happen. If you were that creative to go out there and score on a daily basis, then surely you can figure out a way to make yourself available for work in the morning, no matter how far away it is, or no matter how humbling it may feel. it is embarrassing sometimes. Sobriety is embarrassing sometimes. It's the reason why I was talking earlier. You know, I didn't want to integrate back into my community again as the person that I was in the rooms. I had to put on this face again in order to go back out in my community and feel like I was a part of. I was humbled. I was embarrassed. I was humiliated. I felt like I had failed as a human being. And so drag for me was the thing that everybody in the room said, I wouldn't do it. Don't go back out into the clubs. You're not going to be able to maintain your sobriety. You're not going to be able to make it through that. And I took it as a fucking watch me. You know what I mean? So like, I'm grateful for all those people that didn't believe in me, that didn't believe in what I was telling them could be a possibility for me, you know? Going back out into the clubs, working on the front lines of this thing that we deal with as queer people in queer spaces was not easy. You know, there were many times where I found myself unable to, you know, they love for the girls to show up and hang out with everybody in the beginning. And, you know, it gets to a point where someone's had 2, 3, 4 drinks and you've heard the same conversation 15 times where you're just like, I got to get the fuck out of here.
Can't.
You know what I mean? And I'm lucky that the people that I took space with and that the spaces that I showed up with understood my situation, but they didn't always accommodate for it. It was always like, well, this is what you've asked for, right? So it wasn't easy. It was tough, and I did do it, and I did it for. I'm still going. You know what I mean? And you're going to be humbled. You're going to be embarrassed. You got to get through that fucking ego, right? There comes a point in your life where you have to take everything off, the wig, the hat, all of it. You have to take it off and you have to be willing to say, this is who the fuck I am. And it's funny how when you get to that place where you say, this is who the fuck I am, the people who really want to be a part of your life will show up for you. And they'll say, hey, I've been watching your journey. You know, I look back at my social media and I'm like, I can't believe I put that out on the internet. I can't believe I did, but I was bold enough. You know, I had guts. I had, you know, fucking a real desire to be seen. I also had, more importantly, a desire to grow. And I feel like you grow only from failure and from mistakes. And I had to make a lot of mistakes to get here. And I wouldn't have been, you know, who I am today without those mistakes. And I think that addiction is one of those mistakes that I had to get through, get over, and become a stronger person.
When you won your Emmy, what was that night like for you? An Emmy, like, I mean, if that, like, from mess to message, from like living on the street, fucking hustling your ass off, to winning one of the biggest awards in the, like, how was that for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, it's a statue, right? Yeah. I have to dust it just like I have to dust my TV. So please don't get it twisted. I have to work harder now than I did to get that Emmy, to prove to everyone and myself why I got it.
Like a sophomore album release, kind of. Right. Yeah, a big
exactly.
Hit,
it's like everything that you do past that point is now compared to that moment, right? So yes, it's an amazing accomplishment, and I'm so proud of it. I'm so proud of the work that I put into it. I am a very different artist than I was when I got that Emmy. I don't know if I think that the stars aligned, and I always knew that I would be capable of accomplishing a goal like that. But it's something that someone gives you, right? Earning it is something that I continue to have to do, right?
Do you have that Emmy moment, like something in your life that, like, when you have busted your ass so hard getting sober and you finally got this thing and you were like, I know that I'm going in the right direction here?
I mean, when you're talking about, the first thing I think of is, you watch Drag Race. Do you watch Drag Race?
Yeah, of course.
Are you a Drag Race person?
I made a lot of money off Drag Race.
Yeah. Well, there's a drag queen named McCracken who says, when I was a kid, I was really into karate. She was dirt poor as a kid. And she says, I won a karate competition. And my dad came up to me and said, now you have to win a second one or everyone will think the first time was a mistake. Like, there's this, like, constant need to prove yourself. I haven't won an Emmy, which is major. I mean, I feel like I somehow feel, if this sounds weird, like my marriage is somehow that for me. Like I found this person that in a lot of ways, my own narrative, my own messaging is like, you don't deserve this. You don't deserve somebody this understanding or this patient or this loving. And living my life moving forward to amplify that person's experience, and wake up and say, I do deserve this Emmy, right? I have taken steps in my life that make this even more meaningful, right? Because the person I was however many years ago certainly would not be waking up to the Emmy that I wake up to.
What about you? Do you have...
I think I have a lot of like those moments, right? And like professionally, I would say, Dr. David Fawcett, I idolize, right? Like in the beginning of my career, I would read everything and I would watch everything that he would put out. And then there was an invitation to do a presentation with him at a conference. And it was an Emmy moment for me because it was like, oh my goodness, this person, like, I have idolized and I appreciate and I admire all of the work that he has done over the past 30 years with chemsex, and to be invited into a space that we share together and to talk about openly about some of the issues in the community, that was an Emmy moment for me. And it was like, oh my goodness, like we're side by side, and it was kind of leveled. Right. And I got to know him as a person, and he is a dear friend now. And also I still admire like the work that he does. And that for me was a really big moment.
I mean, Jack, to piggyback off of you, I think that as a queer community, I love my husband who's producing this episode and is sitting over there. So hi, baby. We get the privilege of being able to currently, we get the privilege of being able to marry our partners, and that is definitely something that, like, I never thought, A, that I was lovable, but B, that I could show up for someone selflessly and be able to be loved in a way where, like, I feel safe. Because in my addiction and when I got sober, I loved toxic love, right? Like, that was all I thought I was worth. And so that is definitely something. And the other thing for me was when my mom passed, we had no unfinished business.
Yeah.
Because I was able to do the work in this program. And I know that I make her proud today. And so for me, that's probably one of the biggest things that, like, I'm so grateful for in my life. And then obviously co-founding No Matter What Recovery.
Huge.
I went from selling dope and being a junkie on the, in the scene, to now being able to, like, I feel like I've struck gold. And it goes back to that helping others piece, right? Like, yes, there is working in treatment is emotionally taxing sometimes because I'm an emotional person. And I'm also a recovering drug addict and alcoholic first and foremost. So I'm going to fuck up and I'm going to make mistakes. And working in this industry, I've been able to learn that I just have to do my best every day, and that everything's going to work out. And, like, patience is not something I'm good at, right? I talked earlier about instant gratification, and having patience and connection and compassion and empathy and being able to just be of service in this way. And I just, if I look back at my life, I never thought that I would be the person. When they talk about in the rooms, you get a life beyond your wildest dreams.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm living it. I'm fucking living it.
Yeah.
Same.
I mean, life beyond my wildest dreams. I think that's, I don't know. For me, it always seemed like a bumper sticker, because for me, I was like, well, I mean, I just want to not be homeless. Right. It was like the if I could just get to this point, right? It's called being human, right? Because there's a ingrained, sixth sense about us. It's like no matter what peak we get to, we always look over and there's always a bigger peak in front of us. It's like we want more, right? More. And so you're going to get to a place in your recovery where you feel like, I'm sober enough. Now what's next, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that for me, the thing has always maintained my more is the no matter what, right? It is the I refuse to utilize this thing, this substance, take this thing. I mean, I even have a really difficult time taking aspirin, right? Because I feel like, oh, if I just do this, then my headache will cease, right? I always try to look for the alternate, healthier, more natural remedy, which is maybe it's sleep, maybe it's water, maybe it's just a nap, right? But the no matter what is what continually gives me the energy that I need to go after the more. And yeah, I think that I do live a life beyond my wildest dreams at that point. Yeah. But I'm also living the life that I dreamt of as a child, right? So I don't know if it was given to me because I just hoped for it or want it. I know that it was given to me because I'm sober, and I don't think that I would have any of this without sobriety. I know that I wouldn't have any of this without sobriety. So that's the first and foremost thing, and it's always the no matter what in front of everything else.
It's funny because one of the questions that we were going to ask is, what's your no matter what?
Yeah.
And you have impacted my life and my sobriety by being my friend and being able to walk on this journey together.
Same.
As a child, I didn't know the impact that I was going to have on other people. I knew that I had something special when I walked in a room. And I think a lot addicts and alcoholics do. I mean,
very
I feel
charismatic.
Yeah.
And attractive.
Yeah.
We walk into rooms that we own without even knowing it, right? And there's power in that. Mm-hmm. Jack, I really love where you were talking earlier about your partnership and your relationship. How in one of the other episodes we also talked about being gay and representing the community, or maybe it was this episode, sorry, we're filming a lot. When you are building this life with your partner, and I know y'all are starting to look at surrogacy, like how do you feel that your relationship, how do you keep your relationship centered in sobriety? Like how do you show up for your partner in a centered in sobriety place?
Yeah, my husband is also sober, and we met in AA. And, so much of like our wedding vows talked about like a life beyond our wildest dreams or like that kind of thing. When I think about Eli and I are really clear on what our purpose is in the relationship, which is to bring it back to my mother, a partner's purpose is to lighten your burden in life while simultaneously not adding to their own. And I want to make my husband's life easier, not harder. I was also in so many toxic relationships where I confused chaos for passion, or I confused conflict for passion. And to be like, sometimes this old part of my mind is like, I got to pick a fight with my husband because I'm like, I'm like that girl who's like, I'm bored, I'm going to fight with my boyfriend. And really staying in touch with and promising my partner, how I center my sobriety is promising my partner that I will always pause and make an effort to make your experience on this earth easier. My husband and I are starting the route to growing our family, and when talking about it, there is no there's talk about no like guidebook. There's very little information on like, there's really dry information on like, these are the steps, but there's nothing like what to expect emotionally, like how you might be feeling. What does it feel like if this takes longer than you expected it to? And, all of our expectations of it are through other people. Somebody being like, oh, I think I know somebody who did that. Let me give you their phone number. It's like all just this sort of secondhand information of people's own experience.
Yeah. I think that, we were talking about like navigating, or lightening the load for your partner. And the way that Tony shows up for me is he's able to have the art of pause, which I call it, which in the beginning of our relationship drove me crazy. But like, to be honest, it's probably one of the most beautiful things. I don't have that. Like, it's something that I need to work on. It's
You
like
don't have it yet.
I go from 0 to crazy.
Yeah. But I mean but as queer people who, and I say this because we're in this environment, but human beings who have been suppressed for a long period of time, animals who have been caged for a long period of time, at some point, if you poke enough fingers in their face, will snap back and bite you. And I know from my experience, my automatic reaction is to bite your hand off. Not bite your finger, bite your hand off.
Taking the whole thing.
I maneuver through chaos so well. It was really
We're
difficult.
used to it.
Yeah, it was difficult for me to get to the place where I am now, where chaos is not warranted or accepted in my life. And I have found myself really isolated from people that I used to engage with because chaos is no longer attractive to me, right? But I think that that's something to look at as far as newly sober people. That chaos, that ability to thrive through chaos and that ability to create chaos is something that you've really got to work on.
I bulldoze through people's lives when I'm high. Like, all bets are off.
I'm a producer of chaos, never harmony in those situations. And like now in my sobriety and from what I've learned, and I love that you said practice, because everything is just a practice, right? And through practice, we gain mastery. And I have learned when not to send the text, when not to send the email, when not to say the thing. But man, my window of tolerance, like if you step on me too many times, you're going to get the other side of that.
Yeah.
And it's never pretty. And I like to get ahead of messes in my sobriety. I don't want to clean them up anymore. And that is the difference. Like,
Smart.
I want to get ahead of it because I'm going to spend a hell of a lot more time cleaning it up on the back end. So like if I can get my mind to remember that, and it doesn't always, it creates an easier, softer life for me and anyone around me.
One of the most impactful things that my sponsor ever told me is an apology is never followed by the word but.
Yeah.
So like when he was teaching me how to apologize in sobriety, I would say, I'm sorry, but you made me feel this way, or I'm sorry, but da 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 da. And it's like, girl, it's an apology. An apology isn't followed by the word but. Like if you're sorry, change the behavior, apologize, and keep it moving.
Yeah, there's a period at the end of it.
I think there's also like this emphasis on like being able to apologize, or I'm good at saying sorry, or I'm somebody who can apologize. I first of all think sorry is almost like a meaningless word nowadays, and secondly, I in sobriety do not want to be doing the shit I have to apologize for.
Yes.
Like I don't want to be creating the behavior. My sponsor, we do the 12 steps and the 12 traditions through Dennis F., which is anyway, this model. And one of the prompts for step 4 is, when have I created crisis? And I really had to think about these times where like I created, chaos simply because I didn't know how to exist in anything outside of it. Similarly to like my only introduction into the term gratitude was my lack of it in childhood, right? It was always like, you're ungrateful, you're whatever. I'm familiar with the feeling of the absence. I'm not familiar with the feeling of it existing.
Yeah. And I really like intensity and intimacy, right? Like, and we live these lives of intensity, whether in addiction or just oppression and minority stress. Like that is an intense situation that you adapt to. So you adapt easily to the intensity. I love that you said, I'm moving through chaos. All of us have said we are elegant at moving through chaos, but intensity is not intimacy. Going back to like the communication, right? We learn intensity. We learn intensity in relationships, whether they're romantic, sexual, even friendships, right? Like all of my friendships were so intense.
Yeah.
Like there was this undercurrent of just like almost like adversarial, right? And it's like my opinion against yours, and like that created what I thought was intimacy. And I think through sobriety, I've stepped out of a lot of the intensity And I've really moved into like meaningful, intimate relationships with people that sure have moments of intensity, but those moments, because I have communication, actually bring us closer and into a deeper level of intimacy.
I love that. I mean, when I was out there, all of my relationships were transactional.
Right.
When I got sober, I didn't know how to have a non-transactional relationship. It was all I knew, right? Like the core of who I was in survival mode on the streets, which I'm sure was similar to your experience. Was I was in survival mode. I was in fight or flight. I was in how do I navigate life as a person with nothing, and this survival mentality. Like, thank God I had a little bit of street smarts. I mean, I talk a lot in my story about I had a 9th grade education until 4 years ago.
Yeah.
And the way that I've been able to carry through life is everything that I learned on the streets. And when we get sober, we look at our character defects, which I try to look at as areas of opportunity rather than a character defect, and be able to learn about some of the behaviors that I didn't like. When I would walk into situations, I was like, did I show up as the best version of myself today? And that awareness I was able to get through sobriety because I didn't have that before.
Yeah. It's when we were talking earlier about maneuvering through chaos and the response versus the reaction, right? I think that the reaction is what causes the turmoil for me now. And I've learned how to ask myself in every circumstance, in every situation, in every conversation that I find myself, I ask myself, does this have anything to do with me before I respond, right? And I have found my world getting much less chaotic in finding where my part is in it immediately. And that's when, like, you go back to the steps and you're working your steps on a daily basis. It's like, I have to find out where my part is, where I need to make an amends, and I do it on a daily basis, It's been really powerful for me. The steps have been really powerful for me.
There's the emotional maturity. There's the being able to learn and grow. There's the showing up with integrity and the surrender part of it all, which is, I think it didn't just come to us naturally, right? Like if I look at, people that are non-addicts, right, that are navigating life, sometimes I'm like, did they get the rule book? But the book that I'm so grateful to have, which I learned how to become an adult in and navigate life. I'm the 12 steps saved my life. Yeah. I'm very clear about that. And that's not everybody's story. 12 steps don't work for everybody. But for me, I'm the kind of drug addict and alcoholic where I needed to have a map with how to navigate life, because at 16 years old, when you're on the streets, you don't get that map.
Yeah.
I was so untethered for so long.
Yeah.
And I think the rooms gave me a place to be, and they gave me a home, and they gave me a tether. And then the 12 steps were security, right? And I had never had a secure attachment probably to anything until I walked into the rooms. And that was I knew that would always be there for me, no matter what. Like, no matter what city I'm in, what relationship I'm in, what person I am, it didn't matter. That was always, and still is, always something that's available to me. So it healed attachment injury in so many ways. And I was able to put roots in something. I still at times feel a little lost in the world and like my feet can't find the ground. But when I walk into a room, I know that's exactly where I am and exactly where I belong. And that's something that I never had that the rooms gave me.
I was also using humor as a way to camouflage my pain. Does anybody relate to that?
I still do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I still do it. I laugh at the most inappropriate things because it's how I deal with pain. I think that's a natural response for most people, is to, it's why we're so great at being catty and reading one another. We are quickly able to maneuver through conversation and situations by finding humor or insult in our conversations. And And I have found myself in many situations, and still continually do, where I'm laughing at things that probably aren't the most appropriate things to laugh at. And it's not because I find them seriously funny or I'm thinking that it's because I need to take the intensity away from it, right? Because the things that I deal with, I don't often speak about. I don't often bring every single situation that I'm going with or every single thought that I'm thinking in a day's in a day's span to the table, right? And sometimes that intensity is like almost something that can just make me break. It's why being like super aware of the space that I take up, being constantly aware and self-aware of who I am and what I'm representing in those rooms that you walk into, it's given me an opportunity to really reflect on who I am as a human being and what I want people to take away when I'm in a certain situation. And I'm not always great at it. It's not always something that I ace 100%, but it is sobriety, the steps, the principles, figuring out who I am as a person. It is all something that I am continually working on at the same time every single day. It's like juggling plates. When one starts to slow down, I have to go back over and pay attention to that. I have to water it a little bit and then move on to the thing that I was just doing. You have to multitask, not just in life, but especially as a sober person, because you're going to deal with all of these things one at a time and sometimes all at a time.
I just love you so much.
I love you too.
No, I'm serious. I'm sitting here, first of all, captivated by your eyeshadow.
Thank you.
And bitch, you look stunned.
Thanks.
But like the wisdom that you have as a person, and like in my head, I'm just thinking back of like just watching your journey and us doing this thing together. And like the thing that I love about sobriety is people that wouldn't normally be on a path together or on a path together. And we all get to sit here and share our experience, strength, and hope. I mean, you just met Mell and Jack today, and I think we've had just the most amazing conversation about life and sobriety and vulnerability and fear and just all the things. And I'm so grateful that you came.
I'm so glad that you asked me. I mean, it's such an honor to be a member of this club. Right? And I use club in quotations, right? Because I'm just being a human who's had similar experiences, right? The substance is what got me here, right? It's the actions that I take after the substance that make me a part of this. And I'm continually working on myself to be a better person. You know, I'm definitely not the same person that I was 7 years ago. I'm definitely not the same person that I was last week. I'm constantly evolving and constantly changing, and learning how to maneuver through that is really important to me. Being a decent human being at the end of it is the most important part of it for me, because nobody's going to remember what I said. They're going to remember how they felt when I said it. Right. And so there's all these checks and balances. It's a vehicle. And as I move through this world, in the vehicle that I take up, in the vehicle that I'm given the privilege of driving, I decide how much gas I put in the car and when I put it in the car. I decide who gets to come along for the ride, how fast I go, when I stop, when I get to stop for food. It is all a metaphor. Right? I'm the vehicle. I decide all of it alone and by myself. And, you know, being really aware. I mean, there's some days when I feel like in the beginning of my sobriety, I was driving an 18-passenger van, and I feel like now I drive a Mazda Miata, right? It's like I got room for one passenger.
Right. Yeah.
Sometimes, because sometimes that seat is so filled with books and luggage and my gear for makeup, like I don't have the capacity for it. And being able to say like, I love you, but I don't have the capacity for this right now is so important in sobriety and just as being a human being, because how many of us want to sit into a room or walk into a room and we just want to be heard, and we're spouting off our life story and everything that happened to us, and we're dumping on people who don't have the capacity to carry the weight of the things that we need to unload. And so I think asking for permission is really important when it comes to expressing what you're going through or feeling what you're feeling. And I think that the rooms of sobriety and the rooms of AA or NA, whatever room that you find yourself in a 12-step program, I think that those rooms automatically give us permission to dump. And I think that it's so important that those rooms exist because it gives you the opportunity to not have to ask permission, but just to get your 3 minutes. You know, it's the reason why raising your hand at meetings is so important and finding yourself involved. I used to feel so ashamed to raise my hand, as if, you know, I didn't allow myself to take up space in those rooms. I also felt like I didn't know how to put a full sentence together. So what I would get up there was just a feeling, and I just wanted to make an impact so bad. So what I was saying never came across the way I wanted it to be said, right? And there's a program here in Los Angeles that I used to participate in, and they don't even allow you to take the microphone for the first year. And I used to be so offended by that because I had so much to say.
So much to say.
But in a way, I kind of respect it, right? Because again, it's the reason why those after meetings are so important, because you get to really figure out who you are and where your voice lies, and you get to practice communication in those rooms and out of those rooms. And I don't know, I'm so grateful for the voice that I've found within myself and continue to find myself having. But people often say, I learned how to be a man. I learned how to be a human. For me, the biggest takeaway from the rooms was I learned what my voice was and how to properly use it. And that's been the most significant change for me. So when you say that I am very different from the person that I was when I came into those rooms, the biggest change has been really finding my voice and being able to know when it's proper and appropriate for me to utilize that voice. I don't know if I necessarily say anything that's prolific or anything life-changing. I know that my existence for the last 7.5 years as a sober person is enough for me. Right? That's the gold in it, right? It's like I might not have much to say, but me just existing for as long as I have as a sober person is enough.
That's the message.
We are enough.
That's right.
That's right.
Mell and Jack, thank
Sometimes too much.
Mell and Jack, thank you so much for being on this episode while I get to sit here and chat with my sister. Six, where can we find you on social media?
You can find me at Call Her Six on all social media, wherever that may be. I do run it by myself. I don't have anybody that runs it for me. I'm always available, and I always will try to respond. I always will respond. Sometimes that response is just a double heart. Like, I see you, I hear your message. Sometimes I don't have anything to offer, but I always am available for anybody. That does not mean that I am available for you to tell me your life story in a 15-minute long paragraph. I can't handle that. Like, actually, like it gives me anxiety. So like, just start slow. You know what I mean?
Slow it down. Yeah.
Start slow. Like, I love you. I saw you on the podcast. I love what you said. I really recognize this, or I identify with this. Love you. You're going to get a double heart, and I'm so glad that you're going.
Moving.
Keep going. You know what I mean?
I love it. But
yeah, Call Her Six on all social media. And you said something about what it felt like to get the Emmy. And I just want to touch back on that, because I don't want anybody to feel like I'm like sliding over that in a minute, like in any way, shape, or form. It was such an honor. It is such an honor. And I'm so grateful for the opportunity that I've been given, right? The recognition for the work that I've worked really hard to get. That night, it was terrifying. I've never been more terrified in my life, because they had given me the task of being the first person to speak on the microphone. And for somebody that was still finding their voice, or still looking for something to say that would land on people's hearts, was still something that I was actively participating in at that time. And I also had a situation that was happening at the exact same time where I felt like I was stripped of my voice. And so I was dealing with multiple things, and being put on a platform that large with the spotlight so bright was something that was terrifying. And I remember what I said specifically. I said, I'm so grateful for being able to capture the art of makeup the way that I have, in a way that gives me an opportunity to take up space in spaces that people said I didn't belong, right? So I got to create a space for myself, utilizing my gifts and my talents and my love for makeup. And I still very much feel that way. You know, I still feel very much honored to be able to do what I do on a daily basis and to be able to actively participate in this world of art and finding a form of art that I maneuver in so well. I'm just really grateful to be here. I'm grateful to be a sober person. I'm grateful to be a member of a community and a pillar of strength for people who definitely will always have people in this community that have had it worse. It's not about how hard you've had it. It's about how you manage to maintain it and get through it and continue to stand up and continue to show up for yourself. So I don't know. I'm just really I'm really grateful, you know? This wig is tight, bitch.
I struggle with having imposter syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
As being a first-time CEO and co-founder of a passion project that has now turned into something that's helping save lives. And I walk into rooms with other people, other CEOs, other owners of treatment programs. And in my head, the narrative I would tell myself, and Mel, you and I had a conversation about this. I'm like, I have a 9th grade education. How am I in this room? And we were talking to a client and I felt like I had nothing to offer. And you looked at me and you said,
I mean, you're in it. Like, you have your own lived experience. You've been doing this for years. Like, and I think sometimes it's harder to stand in the light than it is to withstand the darkness. Like, I find that to be a lot harder actually in my sober journey, to like receive any sort of feedback or to participate in conversations like that and be in the light. I know the darkness. I know what happens there. I know my own resilience. I know how to get through adversity. Like, I am an ace at doing that. But like, it's one step at a time to enter into the world of the light, right? And like trusting your own ability, right? You have that, and like not second guessing it, right? Because it comes from here. When it comes from here, I just said in the last podcast, it is always a truth, and that is your truth. But when it comes from here, you got to watch it. Like, you know what I mean?
That pesky neighborhood, that bad neighborhood.
It's also really important. I just want to say it's really important to constantly find yourself not being the best house on the block, constantly willing to surround yourself around people who know more, 100%. Who have seen more, who have experienced more. You never want to be the constant person that people are seeking advice from, because then who is there to offer you advice when you need it? So as you move through this life and as you move through sobriety or as you move through the steps, you're going to constantly evolve as a human being. And I want you to constantly be looking for those people in the room that have what you want, because I didn't really understand that until I became the best house on the block. And I started looking at the people that I surrounded myself with, and I was like, I'm drained.
Where do I go?
I'm drained. Who do I turn to, right? And so I think the other thing of that, the flip side of that, is when you find yourself in a position where you're looking in the mirror and you're like, I feel like I don't belong here, it's probably because you've reached that level where you are the best house on the block. So start seeking out new people to be able to help you see that there's more on the other side of that. Because you're in the position that you're in because of the life that you've lived, because of the experience that you've had, and nobody is better qualified to do it. Otherwise, they would be in that position.
That's right. What's meant for you will be yours.
Yeah.
Every single day.
That's right.
Yeah.
What are you up to now?
Now I'm touring the world. I'm on a world tour. We just finished over in Europe. We're doing half Europe now. We're getting ready to do the U.S. portion of it. I'm on tour with Alyssa Edwards. And that's been a really fulfilling opportunity to continue to develop my craft and continue to do what I'm great at, which is being of service to other people. So for the month of April and May, we're going on tour throughout the U.S. and you can get tickets at alyssaontour.com, and I will be out in the audience and, you know, behind the scenes, and I'll be more than happy to come out and say hi to people. But, you know, that's what I'm doing. I'm working behind the camera, which is something I'm really fucking good at it.
I love it.
Amazing.
I'm really good at it.
I'm just kind of in awe of like this arc of healing, this journey, like from where you have described yourself to be, who you describe yourself as, to what you just shared. Like, there's just like, I'm a little awestruck just by the journey.
I'm just
Beautiful.
a person,
I know.
you know, a terrified person who never got enough, always wanted more. And I still feel like you feel, right? Where you look at yourself and you go, you know, maybe who people think I am isn't what I actually am. And what I have to remember is that sometimes in life, you don't always get what you need. You actually end up becoming what you need so that you can give it to other people. And I think it's such a period on the end of a sentence for me, is that I don't think I'll ever receive the love that I felt like I needed growing up. I have to be that for other people. Mm-hmm. And that's the rewarding side of being a sober human being, is that I get to be all of the things that I wished I had growing up, and may never receive. But I get to be compassionate towards other people because I know what it feels like to not have it.
That's right.
One of the things that I love about you and our friendship is just how deep you are. And you and I can FaceTime each other at 10 o'clock in the morning and have these like...
If you're going to FaceTime me, you better be prepared to be on the phone for an hour.
We do. We talk. we talk
right.
and we have these deep conversations, and it's so cool because honestly, like, again, it's a non-transactional relationship where we get the ability to just be sober sisters and call each other and kind of unload and then kiki and laugh, and it's just so beautiful. Like, and you're one of those people for me.
Yeah, well, I'm glad. You know, I need those people around me. I need those people that are able to see through the bullshit, right? It's why FaceTime and utilizing the tool of FaceTime is so important to me. I don't do on-the-phone conversations. You know that, and anybody that ever calls me, they know immediately. If you call me, I'm FaceTiming you right back, because I need face-to-face contact. I need face-to-face interaction. I need to be able to see the way that you move, because sometimes feeling sad doesn't always sound sad, right? Sometimes it's combined with the way someone looks. And you can tell a lot by a person and what they're going through when somebody's continually, especially in sobriety, when somebody is unwilling to FaceTime you. That is a key component to figuring out where someone is at. So if you want to talk to me, you're FaceTime me immediately. Or don't even fucking bother.
Well,
don't fucking bother.
Well, I love our check-ins.
I know I do too. And I love seeing sobriety on you. I love seeing you sober. I don't know if I ever saw you any other way.
Girl, she was a mess.
I mean, aren't we all?
Yes, it is messy.
I mean,
it's
there's
beautiful.
there's levels to messiness, right? It's like you can be the CEO of a really big company and still be a mess within that level.
Drag her.
Right.
Drag her down.
It's all circumstantial, and it's all from a different perspective. You're going to experience this world in so many different ways if you just give yourself permission to.
You just reminded me of one of my favorite quotes, which is a Joseph Campbell quote, which is like, I don't want to understand my life, I want to experience it.
Yeah.
Like, understanding doesn't get me much.
Yeah.
But experiencing what you're just talking about, even like a FaceTime call and the importance of that connection.
Yeah.
Like, that is where it's at.
Or having, I say it in a different way, but the feeling and the sentiment is still the same, which is I'll never be able to understand it as I go through it. No. I'll only be able to have an understanding of it after I've gone through it. Yep. So instead of trying to get over something, you have to go through it in order to have an understanding of it. And I've gone through every fucking thing that ever terrified me.
Six, my sister, my trudging buddy, my friend, I just thank you for sharing your experience, strength, and hope with us today. Thank you for coming on the No Matter What Club.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for making this space available.
We love it. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see y'all next week.